It was one of those evenings where even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. Denton Creek wasn't exactly buzzing with life to begin with, but that night the silence was so sharp it almost felt intentional, like the world had muted itself on purpose. I was alone at my friend Connor's place, watching his dog while he was out of town. Just me, the dog, and the slow crawl of time in a house that wasn't mine. I kept trying to keep my mind busy, TV on low, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, pretending that I didn't notice how the walls seemed to stretch a little further apart when you're alone in someone else's home. I remember glancing at the window and catching the faintest reflection of the porch light flickering just once. Then I heard it, not a thud, not a crash. Something worse than both, a dragging, scraping metal sound, like something heavy being pulled across a hard surface. It came from the direction of the shed. That shed was behind the tree line, far enough that you wouldn't hear something that faint unless it was dead quiet or unless you were listening for it. And I hadn't even realized I was listening for something until I stood up. The weird thing was that door to the shed was always latched from the inside with this bolt my friend had to slam shut with a rubber mallet. There shouldn't have been any way for it to open unless someone was already in there. I didn't go to the window right away. I just stood there, staring toward where the sound had come from, my ears straining like they were trying to make sense of something my brain didn't want to accept. I didn't want to go check, but doing nothing felt worse. It felt like one of those moments where your body moves before your brain gives permission. I knew better. Every instinct I had was practically screaming at me to let it go, stay inside, call someone, do literally anything other than walk toward that shed. But I couldn't sit in that living room and pretend I hadn't heard what I heard. So I got up, went behind the laundry room, and grabbed the shotgun. Connor always kept there. Just holding it didn't make me feel any safer. It just made it more real. Stepping outside was like walking into a photograph. Everything looked still, but it didn't feel still. The trees weren't swaying. There were no bugs humming. It was the kind of silence that's trying way too hard not to give something away. The gravel crunched under my boots, and I hated how loud each step sounded. I kept thinking someone or something could hear me even if I couldn't hear them. When the shed finally came into view, I half hoped I'd imagined the whole thing. But the door was doing this slow, deliberate sway like it had just been pushed open. Not wide, just enough to make you doubt yourself. I stood there for a second, trying to convince myself it could have been the wind, even though I knew that lock wasn't something the wind could undo. I stepped inside with the shotgun drawn, half expecting something to leap out, but nothing did. It looked exactly like how I remembered: dusty tools, old shelves, a bag of fertilizer Connor never used. But it didn't feel right. It was the kind of quiet that's too deliberate. I tried to scan every corner, every shadow, pretending like I knew what I was doing. But honestly, I just wanted to get out of there. Something wasn't adding up, and I still can't figure out what. By the time I got back inside, I was locking things like my life depended on it. Deadbolt, latch, window pins, everything. It didn't make me feel any better, but it gave me something to do with my hands. I sat down on the couch and tried to tell myself I'd just overreacted, that maybe the wind really had kicked that shed door loose, even though I knew it couldn't. I didn't want to admit it, but I kept glancing at the hallway like I was waiting for something to come around the corner. That's when I heard it, the creak, just one at first, like the weight of a foot pressing down slowly on an old floorboard. I didn't even flinch at first, because my brain couldn't accept what I'd heard. Then it happened again. Slower this time, measured, almost careful, but not careful enough. It wasn't a random pop or groan from the house shifting. I've lived there long enough to know what that sounds like. This was different. This was intentional. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just sat there trying not to even breathe loud. The ceiling above me might as well have turned into glass, the way I was staring at it waiting for another sound. And then I realized if I'd locked every door and window, how the hell would someone be upstairs? But there it was again. Just a few steps. Not fast. Not panicked. Just slow, like someone walking a line between being noticed and almost getting away with it. I felt like I was being dared to move, dared to speak, but I didn't. I just sat there frozen, trying to convince myself that nothing was up there. even though I knew something was. I don't even know what made me go upstairs. It felt like I was floating up there, not walking. Every step sounded way louder than it should have, like the whole house was listening. Part of me was hoping I'd find nothing. Just an empty room, some weird draft, a trick of the wood creaking, but I wasn't that lucky. When I reached the top of the stairs, I could see the hallway stretched out like it always did. Same soft carpet, same pale light from the nightlight in the outlet, but the guest room door was shut. That door never shut on its own. I remember standing there, just staring at it. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to get close, but I made myself take a few steps forward, and then I looked down. I don't even know why. Maybe I couldn't face opening the door. Maybe my eyes were looking for a way out, but that's when I saw them. Feet, bare, pale, unmoving, just standing there behind the crack at the bottom of the door. No shifting, no pacing, just still, like whoever was in there had been standing in that exact spot for a long time, like they were waiting. I didn't breathe, not for what felt like a full minute. My chest actually started to ache. I kept thinking maybe I was seeing something wrong, like a shadow or a trick of the light, but there was no denying it. Those were feet, human feet. I hadn't made a sound since coming upstairs, and still they were just there, like they already knew I was coming, like they'd been listening. I don't know when I decided to head downstairs. It all happened too fast. 1 second, I was standing there staring at those feet under the guest room door, and the next, I was somewhere else, somewhere far from that hallway, crouching behind shelves in the pantry. I can't even remember how I got there. It's like I didn't make the choice to move. I was on autopilot, just acting. I remember the cold of the pantry against my back as I huddled there in the dark. The door was bolted from the inside, the lock clicking shut like it might actually keep me safe. My phone felt heavier in my hand than it should have, and the shotgun felt too light, like it couldn't protect me from whatever was inside the house with me. I tried calling someone. Anyone. It didn't matter who. The call kept dropping. The screen went black, as if the universe was telling me I was on my own. Every little noise felt like it was meant for me, echoing through the silence. The creaks of the house were deliberate now, almost like a countdown. Then I thought I heard breathing. It wasn't my own, I knew that. It was too close, too steady. I held my breath, trying to figure out if it was real or just my mind running wild. But the longer I listened, the more it felt like the breathing was coming from inside the pantry with me, even though I hadn't heard a single footstep. I don't know how long I stayed in there. Minutes? Hours? Time started to warp. My body was numb from the cold concrete floor, but I didn't move. Not even a twitch. If I made a sound, I knew it would be the last one. I wasn't sure what was hunting me, but I wasn't about to find out. It was hard to pinpoint when the shift happened, when everything stopped being a series of noises and started to feel like something deliberate. But I remember the sound of the screen door. It creaked open just enough for someone to slip through, and then it slammed shut with a force that felt personal, like someone was making sure I heard it. That noise hit me like a punch to the gut. I was frozen in the pantry, trying to convince myself that it wasn't real, that it was just the wind or maybe my imagination. But no, this wasn't something I could ignore. The timing was too perfect, too calculated. Whoever had been inside, whoever had been lurking and breathing just a few inches away from me, they were leaving. But they weren't done. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. I felt it in my bones. When the deputies arrived, it felt like a stage play winding down, the final act fading into an empty house. They walked through, inspecting rooms like they were looking for a normal crime scene. Nothing to see here. Everything seems fine, one of them said, as if that was enough to convince me, but I knew better. Nothing about this felt fine. I couldn't shake the thought that whoever had been here was still close, watching, waiting. It didn't matter that they were gone. I wasn't the same after that night. The next day, my uncle showed up. He didn't understand why I was so rattled. He couldn't see what I saw. He moved through the house like it was just another day, picking up where he'd left off. I couldn't stay. I couldn't even make it through the afternoon. As soon as the sun started to dip, I packed my things. I didn't look back. Not even once. Something was wrong with that place. and I wasn't going to stick around to figure it out. I thought I'd seen everything that night. I'd walked through every room, locked every door, and even checked under the guest bed just to be sure. But as I stood there, preparing to leave, I noticed something I hadn't before. The fridge door was slightly ajar, just enough for the cold air to escape and the inside light to flicker in a way that made it look unnatural. It wasn't until I stepped closer that I saw the sandwich. A half-eaten sandwich, sitting on a paper towel abandoned carelessly next to the sink. It was the kind of sandwich you make when you're hungry, but not too hungry. Some ham, some cheese, nothing fancy. I didn't make it. I never made myself one. No one else was supposed to be there. That image burned into my brain, the fridge open, the sandwich on the counter. It wasn't just the fact that someone had been in the house, in my house, while I was cowering in a pantry, waiting for the worst. It wasn't just that the person had been close, so close that I could feel them, but not see them. It was the fact that they had been so comfortable, so unafraid, as if they had all the time in the world, as if they belonged there. He wasn't hiding the whole time. He didn't sneak around, staying in the shadows, trying to be invisible. No. At some point, he decided to settle in. He helped himself to food. He made himself at home. That part's the hardest to sit with. The thought of someone walking around like they owned the place, eating my food, and taking their sweet time with no fear of being caught. I don't know if I'll ever shake that feeling. I don't know if I'll ever truly feel safe in my own skin again. So, picture this, a quiet, typical night. I'm sitting at my desk, doing what I usually do, playing StarCraft, completely immersed in the game. There's nobody around, and that's exactly how I like it. You know, just me and my screen, no distractions. But then, out of nowhere, the doorbell rings. And let me tell you, it was almost like the universe had just decided to interrupt my perfect solitude. I hadn't even realized how long it had been since I'd had anyone knock on my door. I don't know, maybe it's the fact that I hadn't seen anyone in person for a while, but there was something off about it. It wasn't like the usual kind of knock, a familiar, casual visitor. No, this felt more like a nuisance. I wasn't expecting anyone, certainly not at this hour. Honestly, I figured it was probably some weird sales pitch or someone asking for a donation to save the trees or some crap. I stood up, already feeling that irritation rise, ready to deal with whatever nonsense was coming my way. I opened the door, more out of obligation than anything, and before I could even say anything, I was already opening my mouth to ask, "Who's there?" But before I even finished, there was this voice. Quiet, almost too faint to catch, but not faint enough to be dismissed. It didn't even sound like a real sentence. The words didn't make sense, they were jumbled. Almost like the person was trying to speak but couldn't quite form a coherent thought. I leaned in closer, trying to make out what they were saying, but I couldn't quite piece it together. And then nothing. Just silence. I don't know why, but I stood there for a minute longer than I should have, waiting for some kind of explanation. It's funny how easily things can spiral when they don't make sense. I cracked the door open just enough to see her. At first I thought maybe I was just seeing things, but no, there she was, an older woman, maybe in her 60s. She wasn't what I was expecting. Not at all. She stood there, smiling. But it was that kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, you know. The kind that made you feel like she was trying too hard to be friendly, like she'd practiced it. Her hands were tucked behind her back, hidden, which immediately set off some kind of warning in my gut. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I didn't feel right about it. I don't let people in, especially strangers, and especially not when my parents are out for the weekend. The house felt empty without them, but it also meant I could control who came and went. And there she was asking if she could come in, use the phone. Just like that. Like it was a casual request. Like people just knocked on your door at 9 p.m. asking to use your phone. I stared at her, trying to figure out what to do. She didn't even look like she needed the phone, not the way she stood there, straight, like she wasn't in a rush or anything. No sign of distress. Nothing. She just smiled, that same strained grin. I didn't know what she wanted, but I knew it wasn't just a phone call. I tried to explain, the words barely leaving my mouth, but the second she saw the hesitation on my face, I knew I wasn't getting rid of her. I could almost feel her pressing me, like she wasn't going anywhere unless I gave in. It was the strangest feeling, like the room was closing in, like I had no choice. I didn't know what she was after, but the whole thing, it felt wrong on every level. I just wanted her to leave. At that point, I was beyond done with the whole interaction. I tried to stay polite, but when she didn't move, when she just stood there staring at me, not saying a word for what felt like forever, something inside me shifted. My stomach dropped, and that fake smile, it was still there, but it didn't look like a smile anymore. It was more like a grimace, something twisted. I could feel it in my bones. She wasn't just a random old lady asking for a phone. There was something else going on here. Something I didn't want to be a part of. I don't know why, but I started closing the door, slowly, like I was trying to do it without causing a scene. I wanted the whole thing to end. Just like that. I wasn't looking for trouble, but as I was doing it, she spoke again, her voice low, like it was forced out of her. "It's rude to turn away an old woman," she said, but there was this edge to it, this undertone that I couldn't quite place. Anger, maybe, but it was more like something darker, something that didn't belong. It hit me like a cold wave. I didn't know what was happening, what she wanted, but I could feel my pulse racing. She wasn't just a random person. She was something else. Maybe she wasn't even real. I didn't want to find out though. The whole thing felt like a bad dream, but I wasn't waking up. I closed the door as quickly as I could, trying to ignore the sickening feeling crawling up my spine. When I looked through the peephole, she was still there, standing in the same spot. Her smile, grimace, still there, unmoving. And then, nothing, just the silence. I don't know how long I stood there before I backed away, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't shake that feeling. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. I tried to shake it off. Honestly, I thought maybe I was overthinking the whole thing. I went back to my game, trying to push the strange encounter out of my mind. But the feeling, that unsettling, gnawing feeling, didn't leave. It was like a shadow following me around, just hanging there in the back of my mind. No matter how hard I tried to focus, I couldn't shake it. I kept playing, hoping it'd pass, but then I heard something. It was faint at first, barely noticeable, like the sound of metal tapping against something hard, just a small clink. I turned down the volume on my game, straining to listen. The sound was coming from outside, from somewhere near the window. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't some random noise I could explain away. No, it was a distinct metallic noise, like someone was tapping a spoon or something metal on glass. My whole body tensed. I couldn't move. The window was right there, just a few feet from me. I knew deep down it wasn't just the woman anymore. There was someone else, someone out there. I couldn't see them, couldn't even hear their breathing, but I knew they were close, close enough that they could hear the tapping. I don't know how I knew that, but I could feel it. That slow, deliberate tapping. It was like they were waiting for me to acknowledge them. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help myself. I leaned toward the window, my heart pounding in my chest, but I couldn't see anything. The tapping didn't stop. It kept going, rhythmic, like a countdown. But for what? I couldn't answer that. All I knew was that I wasn't alone, and somehow, I knew it was only the beginning. I didn't know what to do. The whole night had already gone sideways, and I couldn't just sit in my room and pretend like everything was fine. So I left. I walked down the hall to the living room, hoping the change of scenery would make a difference, but it didn't. It was just more waiting, more tension building in the silence, like something was hanging over me. And then, it happened again. The doorbell rang. This time it wasn't the same faint ring. It was sharp, insistent, and cutting through the air like a demand. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't ignore it this time. I stood up, my hands shaking a little, and opened the door. The moment I did, I was hit with another wave of confusion. A man, maybe in his 40s, was standing there, his clothes slightly disheveled like he'd been running. Sweat still clung to his face, and his eyes were wide, darting around like he was on edge. He didn't look familiar, not at all, but then he said something that didn't make sense. He said he was looking for his mother. For a second, I thought he was lying, but then I remembered her, the woman at the door earlier. her forced smile, her strange request. I tried to place the connection, but it wasn't clicking. His words didn't add up. It was like he was reading from a script, and none of it felt right. I didn't trust him, but what could I say? I told him I didn't know where she went, and I even suggested maybe she'd gone around the back of the house. I don't know why I said it. Maybe to get him away, to push him out of my space. But something kept nagging at me. Why had he come here, of all places? If he was really looking for her, why didn't he just go straight to the backyard? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something was off about this whole situation. The questions were piling up, but none of the answers made sense. I stood at the door watching him walk away. He didn't look back, just kept moving, as if he knew exactly where he was headed. It should have been fine, right? I told myself that was the end of it. But then, the moment he rounded the corner, something shifted inside me. A cold chill crept up my spine, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I stood there for a minute, staring at the spot where he disappeared, the strange weight of the situation still hanging in the air. Something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling. I don't know why I felt the need to check, but I couldn't just stand there not knowing. I stepped out into the backyard, figuring I'd find him, maybe still looking for his mother. Maybe he was poking around the corners of the yard trying to figure out where she'd gone. But when I stepped outside, there was nothing. No sign of him, no one. The backyard was completely empty. For a second I just stood there, dumbfounded. I even glanced around like I was missing something. But no, he was gone. The door had barely closed behind me when I realized why hadn't he gone around the back of the house like I told him? Why hadn't I seen him walk around the corner? If that's what he was planning, how could someone vanish that quickly, right under my nose? I stood there staring into the empty yard, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just a trick, some weird thing I'd imagined. But the more I thought about it, the more it didn't add up. It didn't feel like a simple misunderstanding anymore. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake the sense that I was part of some puzzle I didn't understand. After everything that happened, I thought I'd finally be able to calm down. I figured I just needed to sleep it off. So I went back upstairs to my room, climbed into bed, and pulled the covers over my head, hoping for some peace. The lights were off. The house was quiet, just the way I wanted it. But then I heard it. At first, it was just a faint sound, almost like someone walking around downstairs. My body tensed, and my brain tried to tell me it was nothing. Maybe it was just the house settling, the creaks that came with old wood and old floors. But the sound didn't stop. It was slow, deliberate, like someone pacing around down there. It didn't make sense. The basement door was locked, and I was sure I'd closed it when I left earlier. And yet there it was, creaking, shifting, like something or someone was moving around. I tried to ignore it, but it felt like the noise was getting louder, closer. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I had to check it out. I grabbed a flashlight from my nightstand, trying to keep my hands steady, and forced myself to leave the warmth of my bed. I walked downstairs, each step creaking underfoot, trying to move as quietly as I could. Every sound seemed amplified, like the house was holding its breath. I reached the basement door, my heart hammering in my chest, and hesitated before I opened it. When I finally pushed it open, I scanned the dark, empty space. Nothing, no one. But the sound, that stayed with me, gnawing at my thoughts. I couldn't shake it. What if someone had been in the house? What if they were still here? Or maybe it was just my mind running wild, playing tricks on me. But the doubt, that nagging feeling that something wasn't right, that something was lurking just out of sight, it wouldn't go away. I still can't figure out what made me actually stop and talk to him. I mean, I've passed 100 people at gas stations and barely made eye contact, but that day, right outside Grey Ridge, he flagged me down like we were old buddies. Nothing weird on the surface, just this regular-looking guy, average build, short beard, wearing a worn-out ball cap with some hunting logo on it. I remember thinking he looked like the kind of person you'd never be able to describe to a sketch artist even 5 minutes later. Just plain, forgettable. He asked for directions to Ashfield. That's all. Said he was passing through and his GPS was being weird. I didn't think anything of it. I even spelled the name out for him, just being polite, and he scribbled it into this little notebook he kept in his jacket pocket. Didn't even thank me, just gave a half nod and walked off. I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't until later, when the sun had dipped and I was pulling off the highway toward the house, that I saw a pair of headlights make the same exact turn I did, just far enough back that I couldn't make out the car, but close enough to notice. They didn't follow me all the way though. Disappeared right before I reached the driveway, maybe turned off, maybe stopped. Could have been a coincidence. Sure, probably was. But I had this weird tightness in my chest as I parked, like something was just slightly off. You know that feeling when your brain hasn't caught up yet, but your gut already knows. I kept checking the window for the next hour like an idiot. There was nothing there, but that feeling didn't go away. I was trying to wind down that night, still feeling weird from earlier. The whole gas station thing was rattling around in my head, but I chalked it up to overthinking. I got home, tossed my stuff on the counter, and let Murphy out back. That dog's my routine, my normal. He sniffed around like always, didn't bark or act off, which made me think everything was fine. Maybe I was just tired. The yard backs up to a thick patch of woods, real dense, especially this time of year. You can't see far past the tree line once it gets dark, and that night it felt darker than usual. Heavy, if that makes sense. Still the kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, just hollow, the kind that makes your ears ring a little. And then I heard it. My name, not shouted, not urgent, just spoken, soft, like a whisper that didn't care whether I heard it or not. That's what freaked me out. It wasn't trying to get my attention. It was like someone was testing the sound of it, almost casual, like they already knew me, like they'd said it before. I stood there, frozen like a damn idiot, trying to tell myself I misheard. Maybe the wind, or some weird animal call bouncing off the trees. Echoes do strange things out here, but it didn't sound like imagination. It had shape, direction. It came from just past the last tree at the edge of the yard, right where the grass stops and the woods begin. Murphy didn't react, but I couldn't move for a good 10 seconds. I ended up dragging him back inside, locking the door without really thinking. And even now, I keep replaying that voice in my head, wondering if I've heard it somewhere before. I spent the whole next day trying to convince myself it was nothing. I even laughed about it at one point, like full-on stupid laugh in the kitchen, just to make it seem less real. I kept the TV running non-stop, flipping between news and cooking shows like maybe the noise would blur it out of my head. But by the time evening rolled around, the sun dipping behind the trees again, that knot in my stomach was back. I told myself I wasn't going to go outside, but when Murphy started pacing by the door, I didn't want to make it into a thing, so I stepped out. Same spot, same time. The light had that grayish tint, like everything was holding its breath, and I heard it again. Only this time it wasn't shy. It was like whoever it was had gotten comfortable. Same voice but clearer, like they'd stepped closer, maybe even inside the tree line. Still said my name, but louder now, confident, like they knew I'd come out again. I didn't wait. I yanked Murphy by the collar, slammed the door shut, and went around locking everything, even the ones I don't usually bother with. Then I sat at the kitchen table, all the lights off, like that would somehow make me less visible. I don't know what I thought I was doing. Hiding, listening. Eventually I called the sheriff's office. I felt stupid doing it, but I didn't know what else to do. They sent some guy who poked around for 5 minutes, asked me a couple questions that made me feel like a nut, and left without saying much. Told me they didn't find anything. No tracks, no signs of anyone. And that was the worst part, having no proof. Just me, alone, trying to make sense of a voice that shouldn't know my name. The next morning started normal: coffee, dog pacing for breakfast, me trying to pretend nothing was off. I even checked my phone to see if maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing from the night before, but when I stepped outside, something about the air felt different. I didn't notice the mailbox at first. It was Murphy who tugged in that direction. That's when I saw it. Something just barely poking out the edge of the slot, not like a letter, more like someone had crammed it in with no care. It wasn't in an envelope. No stamp, no markings. just a torn scrap of paper, like it had been ripped from the corner of something else. And the writing, God, the writing, it was barely legible, jagged and uneven, like it had been scribbled fast, red ink, I think. Or maybe marker. I didn't want to look too closely. It just said, "Don't act surprised." That's it. No name, no context. But it hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because it was threatening. It wasn't. It was worse. It was familiar. Like whoever left it had already seen the look on my face the night before. Like they knew I was trying to bury that voice in the back of my mind and pretend I was fine. That's what got me. Not the words, but the accuracy. The timing. The way it felt like I was already being watched. Studied, maybe. I stood there for a long time, holding that stupid paper, trying to figure out how they even got close enough without me noticing. And the worst part, I didn't hear a car, didn't hear footsteps. Just silence. Like they'd always been there, just waiting for me to catch up. I don't even know why I thought staying up all night would help. If anything, it just made everything worse. I sat in the dark, staring out the front window, hoping that if I stayed still enough, if I didn't blink or breathe too loudly, maybe I'd see something first. You know how, when you're a kid, you try to convince yourself there's nothing hiding in the dark. Well, this wasn't that. I was past convincing myself. I was just waiting for whatever it was to show up, because I knew it was coming. I kept telling myself if I saw it, I'd have control again. If I could catch it before it got too close, maybe I could handle whatever happened next. Midnight came, and with it, the sounds. It started as a scraping noise, like nails dragging against the siding of the house. Slow, steady, like whoever it was in no rush. I sat perfectly still, not even daring to breathe, wondering if maybe it was just the wind or some stray animal. But no, then it came again, closer this time. Shuffling, dragging, and then a voice. It wasn't the same voice I heard before. There was no whispering my name this time. No, this one was deeper, slower. Not angry, but impatient. Like whatever it was, whoever it was getting tired of waiting for me to figure it out. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in that chair, eyes glued to the window, hands clenched so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. I didn't move, didn't call anyone. I didn't even know what to say if I did. Then just like that, it stopped. Silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring, the kind that doesn't feel safe, but suffocating. The worst part? It didn't feel like it was over. It just felt like a pause, like whatever it was waiting for me to make the next move. By the next day, I couldn't take it anymore. I mean, how much can one person handle? The whispering, the notes, the strange sounds in the night, it was all too much. So, I decided enough was enough. I was going to drive into town, crash with Kira if I had to, sleep on her floor, whatever it took. Anything to get out of that house for a while. I figured maybe a change of scenery would do me some good, help clear my head. But as soon as I stepped outside, everything felt wrong. The air was too still, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. Even the trees seemed frozen, not a single leaf moving. My heart was pounding as I rushed to my car, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. I was already thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What if I wasn't fast enough? What if I turned around and saw something in the corner of my eye? I didn't even let myself think that much. I yanked the door open and jumped inside, slamming it shut behind me. I barely had time to get the door unlocked before I heard it, a rustling noise, something behind me. At first, I couldn't even make it out, just a blur moving too fast. I didn't have to see it clearly to know it was there. Then I heard it, a loud crack. The rear window shattered. Instinct kicked in. I locked the doors and floored it, not even checking my mirrors. Not once. I couldn't afford to look. I didn't want to see what I was running from, didn't want to know if it was still there, still following me. All I knew was that I had to get out. I had to get away, and I couldn't look back. I stayed with Kira for a few days after everything happened. I tried to distract myself, pretend like things were normal, but I couldn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, something I hadn't figured out yet. I didn't tell her everything. There was too much I couldn't explain, too much I wasn't ready to admit. Even when the police came by again, I left parts out. I didn't want them thinking I was just imagining things, that I was losing it. But honestly, I couldn't shake the thought that I was missing something. Something big. The worst part is, I keep thinking about that guy at the truck stop. Why did I even talk to him? Why did I give him my name? I can still hear myself saying it like it was just another casual conversation, like I didn't care. But now looking back, I realize how stupid that was. I don't know why I didn't pick up on the fact that it felt off. Maybe it didn't feel strange in the moment, but in retrospect it haunts me. I can't prove it was him, can't prove anything. I can't say for sure that it all connects, but something inside me tells me it does. That day at the truck stop, it feels like it was the start of it all. It feels like I opened a door, even if I didn't mean to. A month later I left that house. I told my parents it was for school, that I needed space. They didn't question it much. But the truth, I haven't gone back. And I don't think I will. The worst part is not knowing if I did something wrong, something I missed. Maybe I invited it in by not being careful enough. Maybe I never should have talked to that guy in the first place. Either way, I don't feel safe anymore. Not anywhere, not even places that used to feel normal.